it's Reagan, and today I'm here to do my December wrap-up. For the month of December, I read so many amazing books, which honestly gave me a lot of joy and a lot of anxious feelings as I was forced to wait till the very end of the month to make my favorite books of the year list. That being said, I did read 6 books this month and I'm excited to talk about each and every one of them. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive right in. First book I'm going to talk about is Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book to the secondary Mistborn trilogy following our main characters Wax and Wayne. This is a flintlock fantasy extension to the Mistborn world, and our main character is a duo of crime fighting like vigilantes. They originally resided in an area called the Waste, which is very similar to the Wild Wild West, but when Waxmillion is called back to take over his lordly duties in the main city, they kind of continue to try to solve for crimes even though they're not part of the traditional police force. This is a really great series that only got better and better with each book. The first book I enjoyed. I thought it was really clever. I thought Brandon Sanderson really expanded the Mistborn world in interesting and cool ways. But with the second and even more so in the 3rd book, the characters became people I absolutely fell in love with. Brandon Sanderson is hilarious, and I feel like that's really showcased in this novel. Also, the plot of this book was absolutely astounding. He really continuously expanded and upped the stakes with every single book, and the plots became something that were so mind-boggling, and the mystery was something that always kept me on the edge of my seat. I loved this 3rd book so much. It was my favorite so far in the series. I can't wait for the 4th and final book in this 2nd era Mistborn world. I'm very intrigued to know what the 3rd era is going to be, but that being said, this book was amazing and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It blew my mind. Honestly, there's a vlog about it, how it blew my mind. It was wild. It was a wild time. The next book I completed this month was A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. This was a very unique fantasy novel that really captured my attention from page 1. Truly, truly unique. This follows our main character, Ophelia, who kind of lives an ordinary life. No one really pays attention to her, and that's kind of how she wants to live. She's viewed as an oddity in her town, but she's fine with that. She has her general daily duties, and she doesn't want to deviate from that in any way. Ophelia does have a set of very unique powers though. She has the ability to basically touch artifacts and absorb their history and know their origin, their entire history. So if it's, say, a pocket watch that's been in a family for multiple generations, she can see every generation that this pocket watch has existed, if that makes sense. So it's a very unique and interesting power. She also has the ability to pass through mirrors. At the beginning of this story though, after turning down so many marriage opportunities, her family basically marries her off to a far away kingdom, to a very powerful individual there, and she all of a sudden gets thrown into a very complex political game. This is a really unique world, almost like there's basically isolated kingdoms that are almost like spires, I suppose, and each spire has their own type of magic and political system. Each spire can be incredibly different from one another. So when Ophelia moves, she goes from one that's kind of like our world in a way to one that's very, very different and almost kind of gives Russian court politic vibes, like Tsarist Russia. It's incredibly intense. I loved this story so much. It was really unique. The perspective and the writing style was one that I feel like I haven't encountered very often, but more than that, I really loved our main character, Ophelia. She's definitely the perfect representation of being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. She stood up for herself. This was her story. She was making things happen for herself, even though she was quiet and perceived as meek by a lot of people around her. And I just really love to see her like be defined in her own and unique way. Also, I just really liked this book. It was quite the page turner. It was also really beautifully written. I'm excited for the next one. This is a translation, so I'm hoping that means the 2nd one comes out a little sooner because it's technically already written. So yes, next up I read, of course, Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. This is the 3rd book to the Dark Artifices trilogy. I loved this book so much. I mean, I don't know. Cassandra Clare just does it over and over again. She just writes so wonderfully addicting, dramatic, dark fantasy, paranormal fantasy novels, and they're just always so good. I really like this Dark Artifices trilogy. It was one that I enjoyed from book 1. I do think this 3rd book was the best so far that we've gotten. She's just able to write such an interesting cast of characters and continue to develop storylines that we're already familiar with, even from like the Mortal Instruments book 2. But like still makes them interesting and relevant like 9 books later, but also is able to introduce new characters to the mix that immediately feel like people that you love and have been following for so long. I just love this one. Particularly, I really like the Julie and Emma storyline and a lot of the familial and sibling relationships that exist in this. I also feel like Cassandra Clare just continues to up the ante of the plot. I mean, obviously we're familiar with some aspects of how the plot is going to unfurl in this book, but then she continuously adds new elements and new plot twists that I'm still kind of reeling from, and we'll definitely have to see how they play out in future books because wowza. But yes, this was an incredible third book to this world. I liked it so much. I think it's my second favorite trilogy, maybe my favorite with the Infernal Devices, but it was very, very good. I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Lots of 5 out of 5 stars this month. As you can see, it made things complicated. Next up, I read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is his new YA science fiction release that follows our main character Spensa, who her whole life, who has grown up on a planet that has constantly been under attack by an alien species called the Krell. Because of this, pilots in her society are revered and almost worshipped in a way. Her whole life, Spensa has wanted to be a pilot to help protect her homeland, but no one wants to allow her to be one because her father, who was also a pilot, famously fled a very important battle and was then branded a coward. Due to this, no one trusts Spensa to be a pilot as her father betrayed everyone. However, when Spensa discovers something surprising in a cave on the planet, it kind of changes her life and allows her to go to flight school, and it's freaking awesome. This book was so good. I mean, to say that I flew through this is an understatement. I could not put this book down. I mean, I just thought this was such a clever and creative world. I also think Brandon Sanderson was able to write flight combat in a way that was just so entertaining. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but this captured me from page one. I thought it was fascinating to read about all the pilot maneuverings, and they even have illustrations to like show what he means when he's saying like certain types of moves as he's describing it, and it's just so cool to look at it and to read it. I don't know, I was captured. The society in which Spensa grows up on the planet is also really interesting, as this is a new colony of humans basically fighting for survival. The concept of like bravery and brashness has been put on a pedestal to almost a very intense degree, meaning anything that can be viewed as mildly cowardly can be very much shunned in this society. Therefore, like really aggressive and bold personalities are what people try to emulate, and we definitely see that in our main character Spensa, who is like to the nth degree. She's very, very, very aggressive, and you can kind of see her have to come to terms with why she's that way and also try to understand if it's the right way to be. So this book was just absolutely captivating from page one. The mystery was fantastic. I can't wait to figure out how this book is gonna go next. I believe it's going to be 4 books, but this first one really started out with a bang, and I'm very excited to see where it goes from here, because boy oh boy. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil anything, but like, there are mysteries to be found. Let me tell you, 5 out of 5 stars. What a December. From there, I picked up Keepers of the Lost Cities, which is book 1 to a very long middle grade fantasy series, and I really enjoyed this book. This follows our main character Sophie, who is a telepath, and she's been keeping the secret her whole life. She's always felt very much like an outsider, as she's never obviously met anyone else with these abilities. However, one day when she's on a school field trip, she runs into another individual called Fitz, who's also a telepath. There she discovers that she's not actually human, but an elf, and she's basically transported to this elf world, shown all of these new things, and she starts going to elf magic school, and then she's involved in a mystery, blah, blah, blah. It's so fun and entertaining. I will say the first 150 pages of this book were kind of for me. I was actually pretty worried when I first started it that I wasn't going to love it as much as I wanted to, as I'm very much in the market for a new long middle grade fantasy series. I felt the first 150 pages were rather rushed. They didn't really give a lot of time to make realistic emotional decisions for our main character. I felt the author was really focused on just getting her to be settled into this new elf world and leave the human world behind, which made it feel a little rushed and unrealistic, especially because she was leaving her family, which is who she grew up with her entire life. But I will say, after that 150 mark, things really began to pick up. I loved the elf school. There's a wonderful ensemble of characters, like so many different friends, from adults to her age, and it was just so lovely to see her kind of come into her own in this new place. I also thought the magic was really cool and unique to learn about. I haven't really read a lot of elf fantasy, so to learn about all the different nuances of this world was just so great. I really love this series. I really can't wait to read the next few books. I ordered a box set and I'm planning to read the next two rather quickly. As I flew through this first one, I found it to be super entertaining. Ultimately, because I did not love the first 150 pages, I gave this first one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I have very high hopes for the next books in the series, as I feel like our character is now very settled at the end of this one, and it can only go up from here. Alrighty, and the very last book I read in 2018 I think will make my top 10 favorite books of the year. Guys, this book was so amazing. And that is Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. This book was just everything. This follows our main character, who is a thief, and she is basically hired to do a very impossible task, to steal a very well-guarded artifact. She does it successfully because she is a very good thief, but then she's wrapped in all sorts of unexpected politics and consequences that kind of turns her life upside down. This world and this magic system is so fascinating. It's set in kind of a Venetians inspired historical setting. What I mean by that, it's basically a city-state that has 4 merchant families that basically rule the land. 80% of the population and the land is split amongst these merchant houses. But if you're not a part of these merchant houses, you live in that remaining 20% called Foundry Side, which is a lawless and very dangerous place to live, and that's where our main character is. This world also has a magic system centering around the idea of scribing. Basically, you can write within a special language that has been uncovered and is still being discovered, so it's constantly evolving. You can write certain symbols on items to make them behave like something else. You can basically write on a piece of wood to act more like stone. You can write on a piece of stone to make it 10 times stronger, etc., etc. Our main character has a plate in her head. She does not know how or why it's there, but it basically allows her to touch items around her to understand them. So she can touch the wall and she can kind of see who's been nearby. She can see what's on the other side, etc. It makes her an incredibly talented thief because she's very good at sneaking because of this. All that being said, after she steals this artifact, it gets wrapped up in all this political insanity. She meets a very interesting cast of characters that kind of help and hurt her along the way. This is such a fascinating world. I love this sort of Venetian merchant struggle for power, this really fascinating magic system that's constantly evolving and just so creative, and the author is so thoughtful about it as he's dropping new ideas. There's also a past like mythical people that's constantly referenced, a civilization that fell, and they're constantly trying to find artifacts from this time to become more powerful. Guys, it just absolutely blew me away. It's a very dark, gritty, and gruesome book, but boy oh boy is it mind-boggling and just so fast-paced, and I loved every single second of it. I'm going on and on. This was 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. Like, read this book. Read this book. Alrighty guys, those are all of the books I read this December. Let me know down below some books you read this month, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.